Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Just the Ides of October. Somebody know more about that than I do.
Morning.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who is joining us from the Secretary of State's office, if anyone?
Are you there, Eric? Are you experiencing some technical difficulties? Seeing a scrolling message that they're connecting to audio. I will send him a note.
Okay. I don't see Tom Koch or Rob Roper yet.
Perhaps they're in the room.
Right.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. We're having some computer difficulties. Can you hear us now?
Yes, we hear you. And is Tom Koch there, Eric?
He is not, just Rob and I.
Let me see what I got for him here. Well, let's get started, shall we? I'll convene the meeting of the Apportionment Board this October 15 at 9:04 a.m. Welcome you all, weary travelers. I think we need to approve the minutes of the regular meetings of October 4 and October 11, and the work sessions of October 4, 8, and 13. Does that make sense, Chris and Eric?
Yes, I think that's right, Tom.
That's right, because we had not sufficiently posted the minutes of the October 4 meeting when we met on October 11. So we now have the October 4 and 11 meeting minutes, plus the work sessions from October 4, 8, and 13. The minutes of the October 11 meeting itself and the October 13 work session have been previously posted, and I posted some edits to the October 11 draft minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to any of those? Let me get to my screen so I can see anyone frantically seeking my attention. If not, then I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the October 4 and 11 regular meetings and the work sessions of October 4, 8, and 13.
So I'm going to move a couple of those. I wasn't at all of them, so I can't really vote on the ones that I wasn't at, but I move that we approve the minutes for the October 4th and October 11th meetings.
Jeremy, I wasn't at some too, so I think if we just did them individually, it might be
Okay.
better.
All right, so
All right.
I will retract my motion. I move that we approve the minutes for the October 4th meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm going to abstain from that one.
Okay. Well, we'll call that one. All in favor of the motion for the October 4 minutes, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Abstaining, please identify yourself.
Ed.
Okay, thank you. Then that would take us to, we're going to move to the October 11 regular meeting of the board. Is there someone prepared to make a motion to approve those meetings as edited?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who is that?
That was Rob.
Okay, Rob, thanks, Rob. That motion
This
is
is for the October 4th work session. This is for the 11th. Okay.
11th, yeah.
just for the 11th regular meeting. So all in favor of that motion for the October 11 regular meeting minutes, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And abstain, please identify yourself. Okay. Now we'll go back to the work session of October 4. And again, the work session meeting minutes are very brief, just reflecting that there was a work session and who was present.
And just so there wasn't a quorum, so this wasn't technically a meeting.
Was there there wasn't a quorum at any point, Jeremy?
It doesn't say so in the minutes. I wasn't there.
Yeah. Okay, well then, I think we can probably reflect that in the minutes of this meeting that there wasn't a quorum there, so it was not a meeting minutes for which were required to be kept and therefore approved, which would take us to October 8.
Move to approve the minutes of the work session from October 8th as presented.
Is there a
I'll second.
That's been seconded by Rob. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Abstentions, please identify yourself.
Ed.
Mary abstaining.
Okay. And the work session of October 13, 2 days ago, where I believe there was a quorum, at least at times.
I move we accept the minutes from the 13th.
I'll second.
It's been seconded, moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the work session of October 13. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Those abstaining.
Jeremy abstaining.
Okay,
Abstaining.
got it. So those actions have been taken and will be duly recorded. I think that brings us up to date on the approval of minutes, and we can move to agenda item number 3, which is public comment from any member of the public under the provisions of Title 1, Section 312H. Does anyone from the public wish to be recognized? Mr. Bristow Johnson, you may address the board.
Thank you. This might be the last time that I bother you folks. The next time I think I'll be talking to the Board of Civil Authorities, which is essentially City Council in Burlington. So I'm offering a for Burlington only, and I remember Ms. Albert. I said, well, I was only worried about Burlington, and you said that you guys were worried about the whole state, of course. But since you made the wise decision to not straddle city lines with the House districts from Burlington, the 10 House districts from Burlington, I applaud that decision. I'm offering a 5 district map for your consideration to look at, and it's going to be probably a lot like. I haven't been able to see the maps that either Gene or that the Rob Jeremy team put together. I could not zoom in to Burlington with enough resolution on those PDF files that were posted. I couldn't see how the lines went at all, really. So anyway, just out of kind of a blind hope, I took the 10 district map that kind of existed, and I paired them into pairs. That would be roughly similar to most of the 2-person districts that exist now. So one pair would be a lot like District Chittenden 6-1. Another pair would be a lot like Chittenden District 6-5. But since 6-2 and 6-6 were only 1-member districts, I ended up pairing the other ones differently. So like 6-2 is paired with the bottom half of 6-3. The top half of 6-3 is paired with the west half of 6-4, and the east half of 6-4 is paired with 6-6 to make 5 districts, and they're very close. The deviations are very, very small between them, and they're all just a little bit heavy compared to the state mean, but not much. They're all less than 5.5% from the state mean, and they're all within 1% or 1.5%. Excuse me. They're all within 1.5% or what? I'm sorry, I got to look at them. 1.6% from each other. I think Burlington people might feel pretty good that we all have the kind of same rules. We're going to all have 2-member districts, and I think that 2-member districts are good because it allows us to cast a wider net to get a better applicant pool. Whereas if we have 1-member districts, I can guarantee you that there will be musical chairs, and that there will be some districts that are starved of possibly really good candidates. So I really highly recommend the 2-member districts for Burlington. Thank you.
That's something that a link to that you've placed in the chat, correct?
Yes, I placed the link to the district builder map, and then I also placed a little picture in the chat just so that you could, if you double click the PNG picture, you can get a quick look at what it looks like. The one thing that I did that is different, it was just cosmetic. I put the intervale, which was in the district that would have corresponded to 6-2 I don't want to say Emma's district, but anyway, I put the Intervale into the other district just for looks. There's nobody who lives in the Intervale. It had a population of 0, but it looks a little better. It makes that district that's I guess I would call it the blue district, a little bit bigger in land area. And that's kind of how we do Ward 2 in Burlington. It just kind of,
How many House members under your drawing would there be from Burlington?
they're all 10.
Okay,
It doesn't touch the rest of the state at all. You guys made, or at least it appears that you made the decision. I was unable to really zoom in on the map. But I believe that both the Jeremy and Rob team and also Gene's map, I both reported that they pushed the line back to Winooski, to the Winooski River, so that 6-7 district does not come over the line at all into Burlington, which was something I was begging for. And I'm really, really pleased that that's what you did. But anyway, since now, I mean, this is beautiful. Burlington will have exactly 2 senators and Burlington will have exactly 10 representatives. And it goes right up to the city lines. And I think that that's the best way to do it.
we are only advisory.
Okay.
We're not there yet, Robert, but thank you for that. What you sent to us. It will help us now, and it will help us when we get to our final
I
decision.
hope you take a really good look at that map.
Okay. Is there anyone else, Eric or Chris, you can see from the public who is in the meeting who might wish to be heard?
I think we have Tom Hughes. I don't know if Tom has any.
Good morning, Mr. Hughes. Would you like to address the board? If you are muted.
Maybe he stepped away.
Okay.
Okay. I think you should. Sorry, Tom Cross is here. I gotta go let him in.
Oh, no, I'm trying to get on Zoom.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I was trying to do that subtly without interrupting the speakers.
Okay. Tom Hughes, you're shown as being in the meeting. Would you like to take advantage of the public comment portion of the meeting and say something to the board?
Not showing him in a waiting room or anything.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to the main course of our gathering this morning, which is to take up the 2 maps that have been developed and see if the board is prepared to discuss them and vote on one of them, vote for one of them over the other as the board's tentative house map for purposes of sending it out to the required boards of civil authority for their reaction, comments, criticism, and suggestions. I will share that I've thought about, didn't think very long, but I did think about the possibility of the board sending out both maps, but I don't think that's consistent with prior board practice. It's not perfectly aligned with the statute, which refers to a tentative plan. So whichever map gains a majority will be the tentative plan for the purpose of sharing with the boards of civil authority. The other map and all of our draft maps are and will continue to be available on the board's website for public review and including review of anyone of boards of civil authority. So after we have that discussion and hope for action, we'll be hearing an update from Chris Winters and the Secretary of State's staff about their how close they are to being able to move out that tentative plan with the supporting materials based on the assumption that we actually take action today, and updating us on some very recent collaborations with the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, which were good news. And I have been working on and can share when we adjourn this meeting, my draft cover memo to the Board's of Civil Authority, the final content of which I guess needs to wait until we take action on a tentative plan, hopefully this morning. The importance of taking action today should not be underestimated. That will enable Chris and his staff, with the support they're getting from Legislative Council and VCGI, to get something out the door on Monday. That's assuming that during the course of action today, we don't make lots of changes to the maps that have been presented, because that would reopen the process that they've been going through to get ready to send it out to the Boards of Civil Authority. And in that regard, I would remind us all that this is not our final action on the House plan, and we will, it will no doubt look quite a bit different than whatever we vote on today, once we've heard from the Boards of Civil Authority, which will not only give us some ideas that we haven't thought of yet, but will point out some things that we may have overlooked or not taken full consideration of. And as we know, once we make some changes to the map, that will trigger inevitably other changes. So we need to keep in mind that we have more mapping to do coming up. And I will give Chris a chance to weigh in on the process of getting this out the door a bit later this morning. So that brings us to discussing the two maps. We can flip a coin, see who wants to go first or who doesn't want to go first. Does anyone have a strong feeling about that?
Flip a coin, Tom.
Good morning.
Mr. Koch.
Yeah, sorry, but tried to get on by Zoom earlier and my internet was down. So I'm on through my phone through the Verizon cloud or whatever. So thanks for sending me a fresh Zoom address, but it wasn't on your end or anything. It was my internet with Blessed Consolidated Communications.
Okay, well, we're always good to see your shining face, Tom. All right, well, Jeremy, I'll let you call it. Heads for the you call it heads or tails?
Heads.
For your map. There we go. It's tails.
Okay, could the minutes show that Tom vigorously flipped the coin?
Yeah.
And the tails is the Cumberland Island Memorial Quarter with a big bird on the back. Wherever
For the
Cumberland.
sake of government transparency, can you hold that up to the camera?
That's why Tom's the special master.
Yeah, so Gene, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that the coin did its job. So I'm not sure what will be the most helpful to the board regarding an overview of the maps. We've looked at them quite a few times before today. I would be happy to just drive through it using, I could share my screen and just kind of go through the map if people would find that a helpful thing to do during the meeting, or I can answer questions if people have reviewed the map in advance and just have questions, then maybe that would be the more appropriate thing. The only thing I definitely want to get a chance to do, and I can do it either now or after Rob and Jeremy speak about their map, I did send around a summary of some of the attributes of our maps that I mentioned at the work session on Wednesday, and then with a follow-up email that I thought would be good to be able to compare. So that's kind of where I am, and I don't necessarily have a preference, and I just want to use our time well. So does anyone else have a preference?
Well, perhaps you could start out, Jean, by walking through the metrics you sent around on your plan that might sort of warm us up to the analysis and discussion.
Sure, I can do that. I'm going to share my screen, but I do need permission from the bosses at the Secretary of State's office, because I have it all on a table. It's ready to go?
I'm making you the host now.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'll just add the disclaimer that's also on the document that I sorry, I need to pay attention to what I'm doing here. I can't seem to do that.
You can't share and talk at the same time.
No, I can't do it. And point and click and whatever. It was an overload. So can folks see?
Yes.
And is it big enough and all that? You can see it. Okay. So I just want to make it clear that for the attributes, so what's on here focuses mostly on the things the lab was able to do during the process we've been in over the last month or so. And in our mapping efforts. And by that, I'm referring, and that's why I specifically included on this summary, just a reminder of the statutory language, because I think it's helpful. I know it's been helpful for me to keep grounding myself in the fact that the statutory criteria are focus, as you can see on the what I've pasted into this from the statutes online, that the House and Senate shall be reapportioned and redistricted on the basis of population, and that the standard for creating districts shall be to form representative districts with minimum percentages of deviation from the apportionment standard, or what we often refer to as the ideal size of the district. So that is sort of the grounding, what I think of as the foundational part of what we're doing, the effort to reduce the deviations to the extent possible, but then with the added section at the end, which says that the district shall be formed consistent with the following policies insofar as practicable. Again, the way I read it is we're trying to get the districts to be proportionally the same size, correct size, as close to the ideal as possible, but also keeping in mind as much as possible the three elements then listed below, also from statute. And as a board, it seems we have more direct connection, or it's easiest for us to focus on the numbers. We know the population sizes of the towns and so forth. We can also look at the existing political subdivision lines and make up our own lines if we think that's necessary in order to achieve the standard. And we have some way of thinking about compactness and contiguity, of course, as well, which is items 1 and 3 in that list of policies. The middle one, recognition and maintenance of patterns of geography, social interaction, trade, political ties, and common interests, I see as the place where the towns play their biggest role, although they obviously play a role in the subdivision line as well. But they're the ones who will know the most about item 2 on this list directly. Although obviously many of the board members also have knowledge about that for certain parts of the state, and we've heard input so far from various parts of the state. So just as a starting point, this document that I prepared looks at the deviations, and the political subdivision lines and the extent to which those have been split or overlapping when it comes to counties. That's the things I focused on. And I could say something quick about compactness as well, just as a last minute item, though it's not on this sheet. And just as you'll see, I have, a lot of data that's for my own plan. What I did for Jeremy and Rob's plan, I just took from their PDF. So I just, as a disclaimer, I may have missed something because I just had to scan through the PDF and pick out the deviations. So I, just want to make sure to say that. My plan has largest positive deviation of 7.5% and largest negative of negative 7.8% for a total overall deviation of 15.3. What I was able to see from their plan, I came out with an overall deviation of 18.6 for their plan. The remaining, and please, if there are questions, if something doesn't make sense, obviously, or you just have a question, obviously let me know. The remaining rows in this table on this first page was a way to think about more broadly than just maximum, minimum, and overall deviation, but to think about in the next row here where it says number of districts that are at least 7% too large or too small. I'm looking at how many districts are the farthest away from ideal. I mean, I could have picked another standard. I picked 7%. I could have picked another number, but and I have that data, but that was the one I picked. And because I think we were both attempting from the discussions we've had to try to get things below 8. That's come up before. And my plan has 10 districts that are either 7% too big or 7% too small. And that amounts to a little under 10% of my districts, because I have a total of 106 districts. From what I was able to count through my looking over of their PDF, the number was 37 for Jeremy and Rob's plan, which was just almost 25% of their districts. And one of the things I thought about, hadn't before going through looking at these attributes, is these are a bunch of numbers and it sounds kind of abstract, but these are actually people. I think it's important to remember that what this is saying is that for my plan, say, if this were the enacted plan, a little under 10% of people in the state would be in a district that had a population that was at least 14% different from the population of some other people in the state. And so it isn't just, the numbers. I'm cool with numbers. That's my thing. But I think it's always good to go back to the fact that this is about people. So, and then the remaining rows here looks at the other end. It looks at the end of, or the part of the distribution of the deviations that are closer to ideal. That is, how many are within certain threshold of ideal. I listed a few that you could pick, 5, 3, and 1%. And for my plan, I have a little over 62% are within 5% of ideal. About 38% within 3% of ideal, and 11% within 1% of ideal. And I will note that these are all better numbers than Jeremy and Rob's plan. And both the outer ends and the inner portions. I'm going to move on unless, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that, because the next section is about divided towns.
This is Mary. I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it correct to assume that those percentages of various districts, if you looked at a 2-member district, I presume that you made it a 2-member district because that improved its closeness overall to the ideal? Is that a safe assumption?
That's a good question. And I can't say that I did that 100% of the time. I guess I would say I definitely did it some of the time where, let's say I had, because I mean, that's one of the things that, sorry, I'll just say one of the things I noticed was, for example, that there were situations where there might be 2 towns neighboring each other that are each too big to be a 1-member district. So the options would be to take pieces off both of them and make them each a 1-member district by removing a piece of each of them and doing something with those pieces. Or to remove a piece of one of them and make a 2-member district with the with the whole town and then the large portion of the other town, which would at least decrease the need for removing a piece from both of them, for example. That happened at least once where I did that. Or a situation where there were 2 towns, again, neighboring each other, where one's a little too big and one's a little too small. That's one where I didn't necessarily join them because I wasn't convinced the towns would be happy about it, but Charlotte and Heinsberg are in that category, right? I ended up just, because Heinsberg had already had a piece, I took a little bit larger piece and kept them as separate. But those were decisions of sometimes I did it and sometimes I didn't, but the ability to use 2-member districts allowed to have that option and choice, and will for the towns when they take a look, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the other part of this table, as I said, I was looking at this question of how often a town needed to be split. And that was on my mind, certainly, as I was going through making the plan. It wasn't something I wanted to do if I could avoid it, but so that was something that certainly occurred to me quite a bit. And I know both Rob and Jeremy have brought this up as well. The challenge of the Vermont towns just not being quite the right size and having to make decisions where you do have to divide towns. Certainly, if you are trying to only have 1-member districts, then any town that's too big to be even a 2-member district. Well, even for me, any town that's too big to be a 2-member district has to be divided, no matter what, regardless. Then there will be an additional selection of towns if they're too big to be a 1-member district. If you only want 1-member districts, they will also have to be divided. So I assumed, but I didn't know until I took a closer look, that there was the likelihood that Jeremy and Rob's plan might divide more towns. And that is how it turned out. Again, it wouldn't necessarily be that way, but just because of the nature of the fact that kind of in a little bit what Mary was just getting at, if you have a town that's too big to be a 1-member district and you're not allowing for 2-member districts, then you're going to have to divide it. What shows here is I divided 31 towns, which includes 10 that had to be divided because they were too big to even be a 2-member district. And I did notice there were also 10 such towns 10 years ago. One of them has dropped out of the 10, and that's Springfield. And one of them has joined it, and that's Williston. So 10 years ago, Springfield was too big to be a 2-member district, and there was a little piece of it taken out. Currently, it is actually not too big to be a 2-member district, but Williston is now too big. So there's still 10 total in that category. The current enacted plan, from what I was able to count, has 21 divided towns. I did reduce some of those divisions. I rejoined some pieces to their former, to their larger parts, Springfield being one of them, Tinmouth, and a few others, Westminster, Whitingham, maybe a couple others as well. But I did have 17 newly divided towns. And the last thing I looked at in this category was districts that cross a county boundary. And I believe there are 20 currently in the enacted plan. Mine it's a little different. Some of them changed from the current. Mine has 21 and Jeremy and Rob's has 16, again, based on my count from the PDF. So I found this to be a useful exercise, going back to the standard laid out in the statute regarding forming districts with minimum percentage of deviations and consistent with these policies. I would make the case that my plan does satisfy this standard more closely. And as a tentative plan, that would be a big part of why I would urge my fellow board members to choose my plan. Obviously, there are additional steps that we're going to get feedback from the towns that, as I said earlier, I think will give us a lot of insight on the second item of these policies that are much more about local issues. So we'll definitely learn a lot regardless of which plan we do send to the towns. But at least if we are committed to adhering to the standard and these policies as close as possible, I would argue my plan is the better plan. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about either this document or the plan itself.
Can you confirm, Jean, that your plan has 150 House members in it?
Yes.
Okay, just
Yes.
like
Yes.
I always like to ask that question because I made.
No, I've done the arithmetic about 1 million times. 44 times 2 is 88.
Yeah.
And you add that to 62 and you get 150.
Okay, good.
And I will add that I took a very quick look at the compactness report that came around this morning for Jeremy and Rob's plan. It was the Schwartzman, I believe, compactness test. And then I ran one for myself. And interestingly, they came out very, very close, very close. The mean score for them, I think, was about 1.4 for theirs. I can tell you. 1.42, and the mean for mine was 1.45. With slight differences when you look at the, min and max, but there was not much difference is what I'm saying for those. So if people were interested on the compactness.
Could you say, very, very briefly, if you go from a 1.42 to 1.545 or the other, how does that measurement work? Is a lower score better or a higher score, or?
Closer to 1 is more compact.
Okay.
And yeah, the way this particular measurement works, well, all of them closer to 1. It's just this one, you're going to be above 1, and so you're looking to get numbers that are going to be above 1, but closer to 1. The Polsby Popper, just to make things complicated, the numbers are less than 1, but again, you want to be closer to 1 to get more compact. You're measuring everything to some degree against a circle, which is like perfect compactness, without getting too detailed about it.
Okay. Questions for Jean? If none, Jeremy?
Yes, Jane.
Yes.
I'm gonna go where you're expecting me to go, and that's Barrytown and Williamstown. How many people in Williamstown are you putting in with Barrytown?
I'm happy to answer that for you, Tom. Just one second. Let me get to my handy spreadsheet here. I don't want to. I can give you the exact number. It is oh, that won't tell. It's a little over 400. Sorry, I can get you the exact number, but it's a little over 400.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was trying to look at the map that your map that I'm working from, and then go on District Builder, and I came up with 167. So there's a good bit more there that I'm not aware of, but that.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I don't want to keep people waiting while let me just see here.
Why do you find that necessary?
So the reason thank you for that question. The reason that I did that was the starting point was I looked at the current district, which is Orange 1, which is has 6 towns in it. And I was attempting to break it into two 1-member districts. That was kind of my goal. I'm not 100% familiar with this area. I did live for a summer in Berkshire. I know a little bit about it. I lived in the general area at one point. I don't want to pretend to know enough about it to say, but I just had a feeling that it would be better as 2 1-member districts, more or less with Berkshire, Chelsea, and Corinth together, and that's not quite enough. So it would be a part of Washington, assuming I don't start taking other towns that aren't part of that district now. And after doing that, the one of the districts that I formed using Williamstown, Orange, and the rest of Washington was still too large relative to ideal. And I also noticed that Barrytown was slightly too small, approaching the edge of, -8%, and maybe it's a -7.6% roughly. I think that's correct.
That's
Right.
So I just thought, well, this would balance 2 things I was trying to balance. Taking the one district that I had formed that was a little too big and balancing out the Barrytown that was a little too small. So that was really the origin of how I came to that.
Okay, well, as I've indicated before, I cannot vote for a plan that does that. I know Barrytown will have a fit, and there is no relationship really between that section of Williamstown, or really any section of Williamstown, and Barrytown. They're different communities. So I feel that the people in Williamstown will likely go basically unrepresented by whoever gets elected from Barrytown. And I'm quite sure that Williamstown wants to stay together.
Well, if it would earn your vote, I would put those districts back together.
Well,
Or I
that
would
would be
certainly consider it.
that would be necessary to earn my vote. I won't say that I'll do that, but
Oh,
certainly.
Tom, I would only add that we're in the tentative proposal phase for the purpose of getting feedback to help inform our decision for a final map, so that the towns, including your town, should understand that this is a part of the process and is not a final decision.
Oh, I think everybody understands that, but I think that I'd like to know that this is basically out of the question.
Well, there are a lot of, I'm sure we're going to find out a lot of out of the questions, responses coming back from towns. Our job is to make it work regionally and statewide, even if we're disappointing some people at the local level.
Understood.
Any other questions for Gene?
Well, I actually just have more of a philosophical thought regarding what Tom just said, which is, I mean, we're independently appointed and can do whatever we want, I guess. But since Tom said it publicly, like, I don't think we should be, my personal opinion is, I don't think that we should be focusing on the interests of one particular town, no matter where it is or where we live there or how hard we get lobbied. And Tom, Koch, I would especially say, you know, there's certain things I would love to see about Burlington, but I think that when looking at the entire state and determining what's best for the state as a whole, that might not be entirely possible to reconcile those two things. And I think that our mission is to reconcile things as evenly as possible on a state level. That's my feeling, but
I hear you.
Yeah.
If there are any other, I think we can sort of open this up to comments and debate once we've heard from Rob and Jeremy. So is it a good time to do that now? I'm keeping my eye on the clock too. Hearing no objection, Jeremy, Rob, you have the floor.
Rob, do you want to start with your commentary? I have a couple things I can add to the end of it, or I can go first, whichever you prefer.
Sure, I'll start and you can finish off. So I'm gonna have to take my mask off. I apologize because I can't read with fogged up glasses. But I sent the memo around to the group earlier, but I'll go through it for the sake of for the public, which is less mathematical than Jeannie's. I'm really impressed with the work Jeannie did to break down the math of her map and ours, which I appreciate. I really do appreciate that effort. But Jeremy and I, with our map, we set out to meet the goals required by law for compact contiguous districts with a plus-minus deviation from the ideal population of 4,287 of 8% or less. And what we have and came up with shows a minimum deviation of negative 9.8%, and the maximum is 8.8%. But both of these are fixable by borrowing populations from neighboring towns. So we can go through and adjust that. But it was taking into consideration some of the other mandates that we have to respect town borders, respect the cultural ties between communities and the geographic boundaries as well. We also, to the greatest extent possible, listened to and applied public input into how we drafted this map. The lab distributed to the public a detailed survey to discover what Vermonters want their legislative districts to look like. With over 630 responses, 75% stated that they prefer single-member House districts to multi-member districts. 60% stated that they believe all districts should be single-member. The overwhelming percentage of unsolicited emails the lab received also indicated a strong preference for single-member districts. 90% of the respondents to the survey stated that making districts conform to town borders was an important factor for the lab that the lab should take into account when drawing the maps, followed by school district lines. But 65% indicated that it was better to split a town border in order to create two single-member districts than to maintain that border within a two-member district. Case testimony from Vermont's racial equity director also supported single-member districts, noting the historic use of multi-member districts for purposes of racial gerrymandering and their general tendency to disadvantage minority populations. We made an effort to meet specific requests from local testimony. For example, we removed the sections from Burlington, the Burlington-Winooski border, and put the sections of Burlington back in Burlington and all of Winooski back in Winooski, creating single-member districts for Winooski. We honored the request to put Corinth with its physical, cultural, environmental, and economic partner towns of Topsham, Bradford, Washington, Chelsea, and Berkshire, and to break these towns away from Williamstown. Some of Washington has to remain with Williamstown to maintain a population balance, but we did the best we could. Certainly, the folks from Huntington were the most vocal throughout this process, and their request to be realigned with Chittenden County as opposed to Washington County. We couldn't do this entirely, but by making the current two-member district, which is Washington County heavy, into two single-member districts, Huntington's pairing with Buell's Gore, Bolton, and the western portion of Waterbury gives more equal weight to the Washington and Chittenden County portions of the district. We identified all towns that can exist as single-town, single-member districts as ideal districts and kept all of them as such, with the one exception being Heinsberg, for which we maintain the current split of population with Charlotte, which is slightly too small to be a standalone single-member district. We identified towns that could be evenly subdivided into single-member districts without breaking the town border, such as Burlington into 10 districts, Winooski into 2 districts, et cetera. And we prioritized keeping districts that still meet population protocols, such as the Bradford Fairleigh West Fairleigh district, as they are, where possible, and maintaining the current outer boundaries of two-member districts, but dividing them into single-member districts, such as Barrytown and Barry City. Jeremy, over to you.
Sure. So I just want to reiterate what Rob said. It is perfectly possible to create almost zero deviation single-member districts if we choose to. I mean, or two-member districts for that matter, as long as we're willing to split more towns. Right. So we have the ability to do that. But on the other hand, there were times where we were drawing districts that made sense to us, but we recognized that we have boards of civil authority that will be smarter about this, that will make decisions about how things should be decided, and we felt that it would be better for them to inform us about how those eventual subdivisions happen. So we're expecting, for example, up in Burlington or in Winooski, if there are better ways to take those census blocks and divide them into the districts, then we expect we'll hear from them and adjust the maps accordingly. I want to point out that attorneys in the House, please support or confirm or deny or whatever. I think that the case law suggests to me, not an attorney, that satisfying sort of this deviation range does satisfy the statutory requirement for population, and that we are not obliged necessarily to minimize it. If we were obliged to minimize it, we can create single-member districts plus or minus 1%. That is perfectly possible to do. And I would. One of the hard things when we are choosing, so our two different plans are choosing to optimize different variables. We're choosing to push towards single-member districts, which necessarily requires a kind of a detachment from the way things have been done historically and the way things are being done right now with the districts. So some of the statistics for that, when we're comparing all single-member districts to a mixed single-member and two-member districts, it doesn't seem to me like we can really make an apples to apples comparison well there. So, I mean, I think that's basically the rest of my commentary, but I think Rob summed up our approach pretty well as we were going through and putting together these 150 single member districts.
Okay, well said. Thank you, Rob and Jeremy. Any questions from other members of the board for Jeremy and Rob? I note that in anticipation of the next phase of our work, we did get a comment posted yesterday from a current House member addressing concerns about how Stamford is treated in both of these maps, which is just, I think, giving us some anticipation of what we're going to hear. And it's a classic, part of it is a classic, you can't get there from here in Vermont. So we'll keep that one in mind in particular. So seeing none.
I actually have one, I just want to make one comment, if that's all right.
Okay, yes, you may, certainly.
I guess just to listening to Jeremy's comment about the standards and the sort of legal side of things, I would just reply, I guess the way I think of it, it's not, yes, I think it's not that either of them are, it's not that their plan is unacceptable necessarily. Of course, we don't really know for sure until something gets sued. And anyway, we wouldn't be the people being sued, I assume. It would be the legislature. Though I certainly hope that. I guess what I would say is the implication to me in this statute is the board should be trying to, if there is a way to meet the criteria better with a different map, that the board should be considering that other map very carefully. That's kind of the way I see it. I understand that we're looking at different things and we're trying to achieve different things, but from the point of view of the standards listed and other policies, they're, you know, as compared to their plan, mine does achieve the standards better. It doesn't, you know, that's all I would say. And then so it sort of is it's not that, yes, of course, we might think we could even get the deviations even smaller at the expense of some other thing that we don't want to harm. But even right now, without even doing any additional work, there is a plan that has that conforms more closely to the standard and policies listed.
Okay. Thank you, Jean. Does anyone else on the board wish to be heard either on either map or on how you personally are approaching this tentative decision?
Yes, Tom.
Go ahead.
Putting aside the Barrytown question, which is, you know, extremely provincial, the question is, which standards are you emphasizing? And I think Jean's goes more toward the numbers, and Rob and Jeremy's goes more toward the communities. And I think the communities are important. I've made it clear from the beginning that I think we should push for single member districts. And I think they've accomplished this. Now, there are things in their map that I would do differently. But I think there are things in any map that all of us would do differently. I think both maps do a good job. On the whole, I think Jeremy's and Rob's map is more toward what I've been looking for than Gene's. So my preference would be for Jeremy and Rob's.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mary, go ahead.
I think having single member districts may or may not be an excellent goal, but I don't think it's necessarily our goal. I think people who want single member districts should address that in the legislature. I think that what we have to achieve is already spelled out. And I have not been convinced by any of the evidence or feelings presented in favor of single member districts that they are necessarily better. And so I think given the constraints that we actually do have, I think Gene's plan achieves compliance with those constraints a little bit better than Rob and Jeremy's plan. But I want to thank all of you for the effort you've put in, which I know has been enormous because I got about maybe halfway there. So thank you to the three of you for actually getting solid plans for us to look at.
Thank you, Mary.
If I could just make one comment, Tom. I made a joke about this the other day in the work session with Jeannie's map about my own hometown of Stowe. But this is one of the things that talking about communities and some of the things that the numbers really don't show up is a joke that with Jeannie's map, my town of Stowe could theoretically elect 3 members to the legislature because it's got a single member district in her map. And it's got a 2-member district. Most of the town is in a single member district, and part of the town is in a 2-member district with some of Morristown and some of I think it's Woodbury and Worcester. And I just personally don't think that that's right. I mean, I joke that I could go back and I could certainly sell that to the people of Stowe. We have an opportunity to elect 3 people to the district from our one town, but I just don't think that there are many 2-member districts that exist that create those kind of levels of unfairness. And I know that's not necessarily part of the statute of what we have to think about, but from a personal perspective, I just don't think that it's right that one town should be able to have the possibility of electing 3 people to the legislature. And that's a benefit of single member districts that you do not get with multi-member districts.
Okay. Ed, do you want to add anything to your prior comments?
Yes, thanks, Tom. First of all, I want to apologize for my absence in some of these work sessions, and B, thank the folks that put an inordinate amount of time into creating these maps, because I sat in with the folks that created the single seat map with Rob and Jeremy the other day, and it's laborious. So I think that you can make very good arguments for either one of these maps. I think Jeannie's arguments were excellent, and I think that Rob and Jeremy's arguments were excellent. So to me, what it's come down to all along is a matter of fairness and equity. And I understand that there's some debate about this, and I think there's good arguments you can make on both sides of those as well. So like the lawyers like to say, reasonable minds can differ. I just happen to think that single seat districts are more equitable and would like to pass that on to the rest of the state. So that's why I'm supporting the single seat district.
think everyone's been heard. I think you probably know, my view is that the giving preference for single member districts is not in our constitutional and statutory charge as something that should be given priority over the standards and factors that are in the listed in the statute. But I'm not, I don't think that is the last word on the subject. And I'm more of an incrementalist by nature, and I'm going to be supporting Gene's map, but I can also, I've got pretty good over the years at counting noses. I think it would make sense at this point to put this up for a motion, and I would entertain a motion to put forward to the boards of civil authority as the board's tentative plan the map presented today by Rob and Jeremy. Or I would invite a motion to that effect so we can then take a vote and see where that goes.
So moved.
So Jeremy moves it.
I'll second.
Is that Mr. Koch?
Yeah.
Okay. And now it's been moved and seconded, so there's a chance now for debate. I'm only going to add in that vein that, as I said earlier, this is a huge accomplishment, but there's another sprint lying ahead of us in terms of reviewing the Board of Civil Authority responses, processing them, and turning them into a final map. Gene?
Thanks, Tom. I just wanted to mention regarding what Rob was saying about Stowe and the ability to elect 3 members. In the map that you and Jeremy have that's on the floor now, that would also be true of Middlebury, wouldn't it? Because you've divided Middlebury into 3 pieces, as far as I can tell.
But Middlebury is large enough to be a 2-member district. So it makes sense that Middlebury, with its population, can elect 2 people. And yes, they would have the opportunity to elect a 3rd in its pairing with Bristol. But that's very different from having a 1 town of 5,000 people being allowed the opportunity to elect 3 people. That makes sense.
Well, I understand that. I'm just pointing out that these kinds of, right now Milton has 4 people. So and so I guess what I'm saying is it's difficult. Those questions are important, and I guess you could make when you do the work, you could make a sort of set a goal for yourself to make sure to avoid that kind of thing if it really rose to the top level of concern. I just think I just wanted to mention, I think it's quite arbitrary to have divided Middlebury into 3 pieces, and it does lead, at least in part, to the same type of point that you just mentioned. Right now, they can't elect more than 2, and in your map, if it were enacted, they could. So it's just an observation.
Let me just add another comment, and I agree certainly with you, Tom, that single member is not part of our mandate, but I think it is something that does need to be considered. Certainly, we ought to get in line with most of the country. Vermont's legislative apportionment is in several respects kind of out of line with what everybody else does. But it will not be, single members will not be considered unless we present a map that has single member districts. Even if we do, I expect that the legislature is probably going to resist it, and we'll end up with a map that has a number of two-member districts. But unless we actually push the point by presenting Jeremy and Rob's map, single member districts are not going to be given any consideration beyond this at all.
I'd just like to point out what I think may be a historic occasion, and I don't have any records to demonstrate this, but I think we should all give ourselves a pat on the backs, because I became pretty good at counting numbers too. And I know that Tom Little is not identified as a partisan, but I think I know what he used to be when he ran for legislature anyway. And this may be the only tripartisan split, if the numbers go the way I think they're going to go, in the history of the United States, even tripartisan split. So at least if somebody can say anything, the vote on the maps are not going to be along partisan lines.
Well, as I say, Ed, reasonable people can disagree, and
yeah,
so can unreasonable people at times. So
are you special master?
Are you?
Let me say that when Tom was in the legislature, he was not known as a partisan either. He was very independent, and that's why he's so highly respected.
Well taken.
Enough of that. Are you ready for a vote on the pending motion? If you are, I guess I would ask for do this by roll call so it's clear for the record. Those in favor of the motion, I'll just go through the list. Tom Koch.
Yes.
Rob Roper.
Yes.
Mary Houghton.
No.
Ed Adrian.
Yes.
Dean Albert.
No.
And Jeremy Hansen.
Yes.
Tom Little is no. It's a 4-3 vote. And the motion carries. Thank you for getting us there. I know there were times when some of us, if not all of us, thought that we'd never make it this far. And we now need to redouble our efforts to get finished on the House plan and go back to our old friend Senate plan. Chris, could you give us an update and review of the plans for getting this out the door? Actually, I think, Chris, are you still there? You had to leave?
Chris did have to leave.
Okay.
I'm happy to jump in.
Thanks, Eric.
Potentially
Please do.
Great. So now that you all have voted on a map, and that map is complete, and the data within it's complete within Magnitude, that enables a few things to occur that I'll probably describe momentarily. First, I will say our tentative timeline right now is to be able to get the guidance packet out with everything to the BCAs by the end of the day, Monday. It'll be sent out electronically. It will include things like links to the current district map for comparison. There's a handy archived 2012 resource on the legislature's old website that's got some great information they'll use for historic background. Right now, or starting this afternoon, taking the existing data in Maptitude Mia is going to be working with legislative IT and putting in some great hours. So thank you so much, Mia, for your work on this. To get high resolution PDFs of the statewide map, but then also individual districts that will show some more detail. So for instance, in Addison 1, 2, or whatever, if a town's within that district, they can pull up the small map of that district and look at some greater detail. Those will be compiled and hosted on our website. We're building out, or Mia's also building out a page on our website where those can be found. Sorry, let me back up a second. We're also working with VCGI, and it's looking like it will be possible for them to build out an interactive map by where you can see the whole state and the house subdivisions, the district subdivisions within the state. Scroll in for more detail on different divisions. You know, you could scroll in and out, expanding various parts of the map. Click on a district and it will pull up, it may be able to pull up a little box that displays some of the data for that district, including population, deviation. This is all ideal. We think this is able to be done. So fingers crossed. And then also a link to be able to get to these smaller PDF district maps. Those PDFs are important because some BCAs choosing to meet in person may not have the tech capabilities to have a large screen monitor where they're displaying everything on the wall and going over it. So with the notification packet that goes out to BCAs will include a memo that you have written, Tom. Will include links to everything they need to either get on screen or in print materials for their BCA meetings. And it contains a feedback form that's been designed by Tom, Mia, Chris, and I, where a representative from the BCA, after the BCA is met, will go to submit a single entry for that BCA feedback that we'll then be able to take and run a report on and get you all the complete compiled report of BCA feedback. It's been made very clear in all the language that that feedback form is expressly for a single entry from a representative of the BCA. So one thing to keep in mind is you're hearing from people out in towns or directly from BCA members. If, for instance, there's a minority opinion in a vote a BCA might take on their feedback, that's not to be directed towards this form. Or if there's public input, the public should either direct their input to the BCA as they're meeting or to the general contact us page on the website for the LAB. Because this form will be specific just to the BCA input.
Eric, will that form allow someone on behalf of a BCA to attach, for example, a set of minutes from a public hearing?
It will not, but we could set up a place for them to email that to.
Okay.
But
That was a pretty common occurrence 10 years ago, is that we get minutes to support the specific recommendations coming back from the BCAs.
No, we could add at the very end, if there's supporting documentation, instructions for them to email it to a shared inbox or something like that.
Okay, good.
But no, the platform we use to design or that Mia uses to design the form doesn't allow for attachments to be submitted.
right?
But is that something that you would like, is an instruction for them to email?
Well, I think I would like it, and I think it's something we're going to get.
I can follow up with you.
No, we have to remember that Secretary of State's office encourages public bodies to take good minutes and post them, so we want to encourage that.
Of course. I think I covered anything. Mia, is there anything that you feel like I missed or that you want to jump in on?
I don't have anything specific except a burning desire to get to work and try to minimize as much as possible what I have to save for the weekend.
Question.
We'll say
Okay.
it's a pretty the turnaround time for Mia producing all of these individual district maps is a pretty Herculean feat on her part, so.
And I also do have a day job. but we'll get it done one way or the other. As long as Maptitude cooperates, that's the only caveat I should add. And, you know, all this, all the work that we're going to be working on between now and close of business on Monday is, it is a best case scenario, assuming that all the applications cooperate with us, but we certainly hope they do.
Right.
And this is probably unnecessary, but I presume that we will all get copies of whatever is sent to the BCAs.
Yeah. And just to update you all, I went over what's getting sent. How it's getting sent is a different story than two. I will be sending it to all the town clerks, as well as to a list of municipal legislative chair positions that we got, that VLCC was able to provide to us for this purpose. VLCC is also going to help spread the word with their members. And we will be posting reminders on MuniNet, which is a messaging platform that we've got for municipal officials. So kind of a few different prongs of attack to ensure word's getting out there.
I do want to jump in and interject just a moment because I just received a message from Delia over at Legislative IT, and she is working on resolving a couple of issues with the chosen map that are preventing the print process from getting started. So she is currently working with the Caliper support team to try to resolve those issues, and hopefully we'll be up and running. But I will keep everyone posted with our progress as we move through, you know, the preparation work this weekend, and let everyone know how things are going.
Thank you, Mia. We're rooting for you. Is a quick question from those who have been working closely with Maptitude, are the two compactness measures something that is layered directly into Maptitude, that if you know how to use it, you can see that? Okay, good. One of the things that we will be doing in our written narrative report, district by district, is showing those. And it's good to know that they'll be easy to pull out. I think it would be safe to not have a board meeting next week. I know that'll be a crushing blow, but if we take a week off, I'm going to be sending out a proposal for a meeting schedule for thereafter, with the emphasis that on the final push after the Boards of Civil Authority deadline, which is November 15. And we're giving, with getting this out on Monday, we're giving them an additional week over the statutory 3 weeks, which is, I'm glad we were able to do that. Eric, do you have anything else for us?
I don't think so. We're around and at the ready, so feel free to contact myself or Chris if you need anything. Or Mia.
Okay.
Hey, Tom,
Yes, Jeremy.
our next, the next thing that we'll be likely tackling then is the Senate map, right?
Yes.
And what's our self-imposed or otherwise deadline for that? Because I would like to, at least when I have a spare minute, I would like to spend some time on that. But knowing the deadline helps me.
The end of
stay motivated.
November. The end of November. We have to act and get the decision made and the map finalized by the end of November.
Okay, thank you.
And I would encourage people to start mapping exercises on the Senate map at your earliest convenience, or to team up with anyone that you want to try working with. Is there anything else to come before the board that you'd like to bring up under other business? Can't see the whole group.
I just want to thank the whole Secretary of State staff for not only all the work that they have to do associated with this, but also for holding my hand, and I'm sure other people's hands, through a lot of the technical stuff that went in. I greatly appreciate it. And we get to take a break now, and you guys get to start carrying an even bigger load. So round of applause to you, and thank you.
Absolutely.
We will, the minutes will reflect that, and we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Jean has her hand up,
Take
Tom.
care.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jean.
No, I was clapping.
Oh, okay, we're done. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.